Oh, oh, what a treat this must be for you. Oh, what a thrill this must be for all of you. I end for you. Thanks to his scandals, Gilbert Gottfried was always getting kicked out of shows or blacklisted. With an unstable future, he needed financial stability, and it led him to horrifically desperate measures. Born in the Big Apple in the mid-1950s, perhaps Gottfried was meant for greatness all along, even growing up in New York City, though he likely didn't know that himself. Gottfried grew up in a modest middle-class Jewish family, but he did show signs of greatness early, which quite possibly had to do with a certain kindred spirit in the family. Gottfried's older sister, Arlene, turned out to be quite a bit of an offbeat thinker. She grew up interested in photography with the bend toward capturing the unusual, while Gottfried himself grew up more interested in entertaining, with their environment primed for originality and expression. Gottfried often put on performances for his family, which they loved. They loved him so much that they pushed him to take a huge leap of faith. Encouraged by his sisters, Gottfried hit the stage for the very first time at the age of 15. He performed his first comedy routine at a nightclub in Manhattan. At the time, his act mostly featured celebrity impersonations. The audiences adored him. They liked him so much, in fact, that he started picking up gigs around the city. Fans started calling him the comedian's comedian, which likely categorized him as a comic with a very classic style. However, Gottfried didn't stick to his impressions for too long. After a short stint at doing his more traditional comedy, Gottfried started getting bored with his own material. His solution: to start telling the filthiest jokes he could manage to get away with, and eventually, even once he couldn't get away with, but more on that later. Gottfried struggled with his new raunchy material early on, partly because he didn't always have the right audience. In one memorable instance of his early years, he did an opening routine for a female rock singer. The audience filled the brim with mothers, and their teenage daughters didn't find him all that funny. Looking back at that episode, Gottfried noted that his agent at the time paid him a call the very next day and fired him. All things considered, a more risk-averse man might have returned to their old material, but it didn't faze Gottfried. In 1980, a Saturday nightlife producer caught wind of Gottfried and his offbeat comedy act. The timing turned out to be providential. The show had just started making major cast changes, and they found a spot for Gottfried in the upcoming season. But while landing a spot on SNL seems like a comic's dream, for Gottfried it turned into an absolute nightmare. What Gottfried didn't realize then was that his time on SNL was doomed from the very beginning. To start, the show's fans didn't like the idea of the entire thing being recast. Thus, Gottfried and the other new comics faced a pretty tough crowd right off the top. Though they officially hired him after his very charismatic audition, they never really let him do his own style of comedy on the show, including the nasal voice and squinty eyes that eventually became essential to his brand. Anything else any other time you want to bother someone fine? Maybe they didn't think his dirty act fit with their show, or perhaps something more insidious was afoot. Reportedly, Gottfried just didn't get along with several people over at SNL. More specifically, he didn't get along with the writers. So, instead of using his style to their advantage, they stuck him with more traditional roles and impersonations. I lied. I love it when you two fight. In one instance, though, it seems that they took their dislike of him just a little bit too far. According to Gottfried, the writers hated him so much that they once created a sketch that featured him as a literal corpse. Granted, that's his personal take on things, and very possibly not why the writers brought him into a casket. Either way, his life at SNL didn't last too long. If you believe Gottfried's version of events, he turned out to be one of the last to know he wouldn't return to SNL. In an interview, he recounted getting a fan letter from a teenage girl who tried to console him for losing his spot before SNL even actually fired him. Whether that holds true or not, he'd already caught the eye of the next stop on his journey to the top. Gottfried got a second chance at television not too long after being ousted from SNL. This time, MTV came knocking, booking him for a series of promos. He finally got to improvise, showing his real comedic style. Though the promos made for very short airtime, they turned out to be a hit. Bill Cosby discovered Gottfried through these promos and quickly became a fan of his work, so much so that he hired him for a reoccurring role on one of TV's biggest shows at the time, The Cosby Show. With that solid step into the world of television, Gottfried seemingly proved he had much more to give than anyone imagined. Gottfried's career took off after his time with Cosby. He appeared in multiple television shows and films throughout the 1980s, including Thick of the Night, The Howard Stern Show, and Beverly Hills Cop 2. He leaned into his own personal style, perfecting the nasal tone and squinty-eyed character many are familiar with today. But of course, there's no totally smooth horse to success. In 1991, the Emmy Awards selected Gottfried to present one of the awards. In the land of film and TV, the shows at the screen community likely considered him a Hollywood staple, and even though he didn't receive an award that night, presenting one held its own prestige. Or it did until Gottfried actually did it. When Gottfried went up to present the award, the audience in the studio and at home definitely expected a couple of jokes, probably even a few raunchy ones. But he gave them much more than they expected. It started with a reference to an incident regarding another comedian, Paul Rubin. Just a short period before the Emmy show, authorities took Rubin in for touching his, in a public place. Gottfried started off his presentation insinuating himself to be just as guilty of that type of activity and continued to harp on it for the entire minute-and-a-half duration of his time. "I sleep a lot better since Pee Wee Herman's been arrested." Fox, the network airing the Emmys live, struggled to rein things in. Unfortunately for them, they only managed to censor the showing for a portion of their viewers. The backlash came immediately, with Fox insisting they'd never put Gottfried on air again. According to a Rolling Stones article, the industry basically blacklisted Gottfried after his Emmys tirade. A blacklisted star typically loses both endorsements and opportunity to work. In short, no big studios or producers wanted to associate with anyone that might affect their bottom line. Despite all the alleged outrage surrounding the incident, Gottfried kept right on working. And interestingly enough, he actually became a popular selection for voicing characters in children's content. Pop in a decimal point and, uh-oh. He voiced roles in the Aladdin films House of Mouse and even Thumbelina. In the late 1990s, Gottfried often appeared on the show Hollywood Squares. The classic game show featured celebrities playing a type of tic-tac-toe style game, where they each received the opportunity to slip in their jokes prior to answering questions. Gottfried was a popular guest, but on one specific episode, he took things too far. During a typical run of the show, in October 1999, several of the guests gave wrong answers in a row. In response, one of the contestants yelled, "You fool!" Gottfried got a kick-out fit and started inserting the declaration, "You fool," into the episode every chance he got. The other stars picked up and joined in. Honestly, that sounds pretty hilarious to me, but the show's execs certainly didn't find it amusing. The Gottfried-inspired chaos upended the format of the show. Instead of playing multiple rounds in the half hour as they usually did, they only completed one round of the game. The show's executives raged. They officially fired him after the show after the incident. But, as you can probably guess by his patterns so far, that didn't last too long. Gottfried returned to Hollywood Squares a month after they fired him. It seems that despite his tendency to do his own thing at any time, audiences still loved what he brought to the table. He continued his career ascent, voicing even more roles and landing a regular gig as the voice of the duck in the Aflac commercials. Aflac. Around the time of the Hollywood Squares incident, Gottfried first met producer Derek Kravitz. While most of the details of the romance remains private, Kravitz's social showcased her own sense of humor, which proved an excellent fit for Gottfried. The two dated for several years and married in 2007, but not before Gottfried got himself into a little bit more trouble. Now a certified star, Gottfried attended a Hugh Hefner roast in September 2001. Just about every American of a certain age thinks of one thing when they think of that time in history, the notorious 9/11 tragedy. And in fact, this event took place just weeks after the devastating event that considered what do you think Gottfried decided to joke about. Of course, Gottfried just had to slip in and joke about the tragedy. He said he meant to get on a flight but couldn't because they said they have to stop at the Empire State Building first. The crowd reacted immediately, booing and yelling too soon. Gottfried, however, didn't seem to care at all. Rather than pulling back on those types of joke, Gottfried leaned in even harder. Looking back on his 9/11 joke, he remembered the crowd's shocked reaction and his own decision to go even harder. By his own account, he figured, why not go into a lower level of hell? And when he landed a spot in a comedy-centered documentary, he got the chance to do just that. The 2005 documentary comedy film The Aristocrats aired Gottfried's 9/11 spiel without censoring. Considering the rated R content, you'll need to check out the movie for yourself for the details. The film did pretty well, even though AMC banned it from playing at the theaters, and with Gottfried never having to pay for any of his supposed transgressions, he continued right along making them. After the film, Gottfried got the chance to take his very borderline jokes even further with a video feature hosted by Funny or Die. In this feature, he explicitly told jokes about tragic historical events. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. The feature did well enough, and I imagine Gottfried felt invincible by that point. But all good things come to an end, and eventually, Gottfried's chickens came back to roost. Or more specifically, his ducks did. On March 11, 2011, a destructive earthquake rocked Japan. The 6-minute earthquake resulted in a major tsunami, further devastating the country. People around the world watched with horror as the fatalities and damage rose exponentially with no signs of stopping. And what did Gottfried do just 3 days later? He got on Twitter to joke about it. In several tweets, Gottfried issued a long series of jokes about the national disaster. His rant included jokes like, I split up with my girlfriend, but like the Japanese say, there'll be another one floating by any minute now. While Gottfried got busy with his Twitter fingers, he neglected to consider the possible reactions of his longtime employer, Aflac. Or perhaps he didn't realize one major fact: that Aflac did the majority of their business in the very country Gottfried threw under the bus with his tweets. Perhaps Gottfried just didn't think twice because of what he'd gone away with already. Aflac reacted promptly to Gottfried's jokes. They not only issued a public apology, but they immediately dropped him and posted a nationwide casting call for his replacement. Even so, Gottfried himself didn't seem too moved, though he did issue a public apology as well. By all accounts, Gottfried managed to stay close to his family throughout all the ups and downs of his controversial career. He maintained a strong relationship with his sisters and went on to have 2 children with his wife. It seems that despite his elude public persona, he kept his family close and taken care of. In the 2000s, doctors diagnosed Gottfried's older sister Arlene with cancer. As her health began to wane, Gottfried took it upon himself to attend to her directly, ensuring he visited her often and did everything he could to help. Maybe that explains one of the very few times he found himself at a loss for words. Arlene passed on August 8, 2017. Her friends, family, and fans mourned her publicly. But somewhat surprisingly, Gottfried did not. Although he was mostly a very avid social media user, he declined to make any comment about her death online, which seems to speak to the very depths of his grief. Unknown to as many fans, Gottfried suffered with an illness for many of his later years. Although the exact timing remains undercover, doctors diagnosed him with the type of muscular dystrophy, which affected him in increasing amounts as he aged. But even with his physical limitations, Gottfried showed no signs of stopping. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factor 8 member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. Somehow, Gottfried escaped the controversies of his career mostly unscathed, and while he did lose his spot with Aflac, he continued to make his mark on screen. In the later 2000s and 2010s, he appeared in several television series, including Law & Order's Special Victims Unit, Family Guy, and even Hannah Montana. What are you doing on a Hannah Montana concert? And as if that wasn't enough success for him, he went on to find a way to dominate in a rising corner of the media. Critics cite Gottfried's originality as the key to his success. Even though he started out his career as a comedian's comedian, he quickly developed his own style. As one critic noted in an article of the Dallas Observer, he didn't just tell jokes, he joked about his jokes. Even so, though, I'd argue he's even more well known for something many people don't realize he totally made up. Gottfried's voice, the very exaggerated, borderline annoying voice of the villain's parrot sidekick in Aladdin, may be even more famous than the man himself. "You got a problem, Pinky." And while he used it so often some thought it was his natural voice, he actually created the persona. As such, he managed to be both a super dirty stand-up comedian and a common voice in children's entertainment. His originality and fresh persona probably paired with one other little-known fact to keep his career steady. Many people don't know that. Despite the great wealth he amassed during his lifetime, Gottfried maintained a very low-key lifestyle. Reportedly, he was so money-conscious that he continued to take public transportation to avoid paying expensive taxi fare. And yet, even with his success and frugal ways, he kept working to the very end. In 2022, Gottfried recorded an episode of his podcast with award-winning American actress Brenda Vaccaro. Just a few hours after wrapping the episode, he ended up in the hospital with heart complications related to his long-term disease. Gottfried passed at the hospital on April 12, 2022. His family and friends buried him 2 days later. Several celebrities showed up to celebrate his life and mourn his passing, including Jeff Ross, Mario Cantone, and Paul Schaefer. As they laid him to rest, they made sure to do it with one more witty remark. Gottfried's family buried him in a cemetery in Valhalla, New York. On his grave marker, they placed a statement, "Too soon," a double entendre, alluding both to his controversial 9/11 joke, as well as to his fans' consensus that he'd passed too soon. Luckily for them, however, Gottfried's physical end wouldn't be the last time they heard from him. As he had been working right until his last few days on Earth, content featuring Gottfried continued to appear after he passed. This includes a role on Royal Crackers, which aired a year after his passing, as well as podcast episodes that he'd completed prior to the end of his life. Not surprisingly, though, that proved just the tip of the iceberg when it came to the legacy he left behind. Gottfried received several honors after his passing. This includes an entry into the Monster Kid Hall of Fame, as well as a festival in video games dedicated to his memory. All things considered, Gottfried definitely had his controversial moments, but they all worked together with his comedic genius to leave an indelible mark on the work of entertainment. He shows that in some cases, it does pay to be just a little bad. More with Gilbert Gottfried when we come back. That has to be written out for. If you enjoyed this fact in a video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. Want to say who we cover next? Join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.